Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Super honored to have Jesse Elder with me today. We got to meet in Austin through Cal Callahan, and we had a short time to hang out, but I wanted to get to know him better. So, Jesse, how's it going? Good to see you, man.
Amazing, Joel. Thank you, dude. This is feels like a long time coming.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm glad that we connected and just wanted to kind of get to know your story a little bit and introduce my audience to you. I listened to your talk on the way forward with Alex Zek and
Mm.
also with Joel and Yerasimos. I was just on a hike with Yerasimos a couple days ago.
Oh, cool. Love
Um,
those. All those guys are just such solid men.
yeah, it's really amazing to meet so many great people, and it's so cool that you guys all hang out in Austin together. There's a lot of cool people in Austin, and yeah, it sounds like the place to be. I'm out in California near Yerasimos and Topanga, but yeah, lots of different places. So I was really impressed with kind of the story you shared on the way forward around your childhood. It sounds like you
Mhm.
had parents that were conscious, which is really a rare thing. Maybe that's not true, but it sounds like they were raising you in a way that was really magical and that benefited you. And was hoping you could just talk to my audience a little bit about how you were raised, what your parents were like, and go into any depths of what your journey has been since childhood, and just give us a brief intro.
I love it, man. This is already has the feeling of like we're going to go to some very interesting places today.
Cool.
Man, it's just so good to be here. This is such a such a season for so many people right now, myself included. A season of shedding,
Mhm.
and just really kind of tuning into what got us here isn't going to get us to where where we're going. And I think on the other side of that shedding is just such a clarity and a simplification that prior to the shedding, whatever that is, whether it's, work stuff or personal stuff or inner stuff or, shedding weight or, shedding, stuff that's toxic. Before you go through the shedding process, the idea of simplification feels like missing out. It's like, well, I need all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you realize it's like the thing that's holding you back. And this is I'm very much looking forward to just diving in and kind of philosophically sparring with you and by default with everybody that's tuning in. So I'm super appreciative to be here.
Cool.
Um, yeah, I mean, my parents would probably actively deny being labeled as conscious. I don't even think that I don't remember that word being used once at any time in my childhood or growing up in our family. Um, they were a perfect match, like just the
Mhm.
universe knew what it was doing when it put those kids together. It was like instant. My mom is from New York, from Long Island. My dad is from Connecticut. My mom is going to school in New York City, nursing school, and her roommate said, "Hey, I think you should meet my brother." And it turned
Mhm.
out that my mom's roommate was my dad's sister, and
Wow.
so we met, or they met, and my mom was telling me this story a couple of years ago because we were talking about purpose, and she was just acknowledging the appreciation that she had for the work that I was doing specifically with men and around purpose. And I just realized as we're just traveling down the road, I'm in my truck and she's there, and I'm just like, I don't think I've ever asked you what is your purpose. And she
Mhm.
just smiled, and she's up there in years, raised five kids, had this epic relationship with my dad. They got divorced a couple of decades ago, but still very, very close. And she just smiled and she said, I've always known that I've had three purposes.
Mhm.
And, one was to educate people about death and dying.
Wow.
And she worked in hospice for many years. Um, she said the second was to raise awesome humans. And the third was to love and support Jack Elder. And I'm like, how did you know when that part was your purpose? And she just smiled and she said, the moment that I met him.
Wow.
And she was 19. He was like 23, 24. And it was just instant. Like they just knew. and just incredible,
Mm,
incredible.
mm,
And they, their early, courtship and just getting to hear the stories from mostly from my mom, because my dad is very, very non-expressive, non-talkative, non-emotional. He's extremely non-talkative now because he doesn't have a body anymore. He let his body go on August 1st,
mhm.
but he's still very active, very,
Yeah.
very active. But the stories of how just how simple and how genuine, even their courtship. They were living a very simple life. Um, they, my dad, when he was courting my mom, he got a dime, like a pre 1964, like pure silver dime, and he spent I don't know how many hours and hours and hours with a big spoon and
Mm,
putting the dime in his hand and just hitting the edge of the dime and just turning it little by little until the ridges had sort of mushroomed out. Then he
mm,
takes the dime, puts it in a
mm.
vise in his wood shop, and drills a hole through it. Then takes a
Wow.
rat tail file and just files it out and makes her a silver ring.
Yes.
It's
No
like, come on,
way.
man, who does this?
Wow.
And and there's just that
Mm,
that really there's a lot of sort of
mm,
spiritual DNA even just in that story, because that was how they operated, very simply.
mm,
Um, my dad had made a conscious decision to sort of avoid materialism. He grew up in a fairly well-to-do family. His father was a machine shop owner during World War II, so there's all these government contracts, and so they had money. My dad is the black sheep of the family. When he left school, graduated Catholic University, and then ended up joining the Peace Corps. So he was in the
mm,
Peace Corps for a couple of years in Central America. Just fell in love with the culture, spoke Spanish fluently, and when he got out of the Peace Corps, they said he was in Panama. They said, "Well, we'll buy you a plane ticket back to New Haven, Connecticut, or we can just give you the ticket price. It was like $100, $150 back then." And he said, "I'll take the money." So he takes the money, buys a motorcycle, and
mm.
then rides the motorcycle from Panama City up to New Haven, Connecticut,
Oh,
over like 3 months. And he
wow.
just has so many stories from that. So he gets back, he's with my mom, and shortly after he got back from the Peace Corps, he was drafted in 1968 and
Wow.
ended up going to Vietnam.
Mm,
And that was especially later in life. He never shared anything about what happened in Vietnam, but he was extremely vocal about that was the biggest regret of his life was
wow.
saying yes to going. Um,
Mm,
and he got back and he was affected. There was all sorts of childhood stuff that he never talked about. Then Vietnam later on top of that. So he was extremely non-expressive, um, but extremely passionate. But passionate through action, not through words and not through expression. His expressions were physical, and he was the ultimate maker, always making things. And he and my mom are just the perfect team, because she's this nurturing, loving, trying to connect with this guy who's pretty emotionally shut down but deeply loving, deeply convicted, deeply loyal. And
wow.
she's like the life of the party, and she's like
Mhm.
laughing. And I remember just hundreds of times growing up just being embarrassed because we were like at the grocery store and she's like dancing because there's music playing. I'm like, "Mom." And she was like, "You don't have to like it. And if it embarrasses you, you can pretend you don't know me. You can stand on the other side. I'll meet you outside,
Wow.
but the message was like, I'm gonna have a good time and you can join or not join." It was never performative. She was never trying to get attention. She was just very in tune with her own signal. And so they're the perfect team, man. Just like, his very kind of never used this word, but very stoic, um, principled. And, she's just this light who is just active and knows that her role is to love and support him, and that his role is to completely handle things on the outside world. And they
Mm,
just created this beautiful, yeah, just a beautiful field, beautiful space. And so By the time I came around in 1973, they were living in Texas, just outside of Austin, and I was born on November 21st, 1973. And according to them, like they've shared this separately, individually over many years. Um, According to them, when I was born, they were just kind of looking at me and looking at each other, and they just both sort of had this feeling, this epiphany, and they said that we feel like this kid is going to know what he needs for himself more than we do. So they just made a decision to, like, we're just going to love this kid and stay out of his way and just let him show us how to parent him. And that when I was on Joel and Erasmus podcast, I shared a story which I may share here, and the thing gets like 5,000 comments, and people are losing their shit. They're just like, "That's negligence," and it's like, well, was it, or was it just trust? And the story is a very quick one. We're on this beach again. I'm too young to remember it, but I was probably two, 2.5, and we're on this beach, probably in New York, Long Island, and they've got this blanket down, and I allegedly, this is hearsay. I can't corroborate it, but according to them, I walked down, in my little swim trunks down to the water, and what's the normal reaction for a parent? When your baby, your toddler is like getting close to the waves, it's like stop.
Yeah.
But they held to their principles. They held to this exploration that he's got to learn from his own experiences. And
Mhm.
so they just stuck with their decision to neither intrude, by trying to restrict based on what might happen, nor to encourage. And so they just were very neutral and very present. And according to them, I walk down to the water, I look back, and they're just there. They're just watching. There's no caution sign, and there's no you can do it sign. So there was just no preference on their part, just presence.
Wow.
And apparently I just like toddled on down the beach almost to the point that I was out of sight. And every once in a while I just turned and look, and they were just there watching. And after a while, I apparently satisfied whatever curiosity I had, and came on back. And then it was back with the family again.
Mm.
And I don't remember that story. I don't remember that happening, but they both shared it multiple times. And dude, there was thousands of experiences like that for me and for eventually my four siblings, three brothers and a sister. And that was just
Mm.
kind of the unspoken ethos of our family, that, we're not here as parents to teach you.
Mm.
The world is here to teach you. And the only way you learn is through experience. And the only experiences that you're going to have any sort of investment in are the things that you are interested in.
Mm.
And so as a result, I never went to school. I never sat behind a desk. I never,
Wow.
took a test. I've never gotten a grade. I don't know what it's like to, raise my hand, ask permission to go to the bathroom. The whole concept of external authority and rules is literally alien to me.
Wow.
And and so, yeah, I mean, that's a little bit about these epic people who are my mom and dad.
Oh man, thank you. Yeah, it's so cool. It's good to know that that exists and that, you experienced it. I knew some Waldorf parents or some unschool parents that let their kids climb trees that would normally wouldn't let, and like they're
Hmm.
walking out on the limbs and they're balancing and it's just so cool to trust in a child's ability to take care of themselves and to have
Yeah.
adventure and so your life has been a constant adventure in that respect that you weren't ever, corralled into a cage, so to speak. It's inspiring. It's good for parents to know that that's possible, because a lot of people are choosing not to have kids these days because they think the
Mm,
world's unpredictable. But I think we need to have aware people being willing to have children, as well, because I think this is going to continue. It's going to shape
hmm.
shift.
Hmm.
But we're in a really powerful time where forces rise to meet each other and things are unpredictable. And I'm just glad to know that you're out there helping people, teaching, sharing. What kind of, how did you end up establishing yourself as a martial artist, and when did that come in, and how has that been sort of, how has that structured your life to be training in the way that you did?
Yeah, that's it's a great segue. Because of this very completely self-directed, self-guided, it was anarchy in the original authentic sense of the word.
Yeah.
We're conditioned to think that anarchy is like Mad Max and martial law and
Yeah.
cannibalism and all this awful stuff, but it literally just means self-rule.
Yeah.
That's all it means. Monarchy is one person ruling everybody. You have an oligarchy, it's like this collection of powerful people, but anarchy is self-rule. It's the rule of yourself, and having no interest in trying to rule someone else, nor having someone else rule you. And so it was in the original meaning of the word, it was a very anarchistic lifestyle and
Yeah.
and childhood. So that led to lots of different interests, and one of those interests became martial arts. There was like a little taekwondo school that was a couple of blocks from our house in south side of San Antonio. And one day I think I just saw a flyer up on a telephone pole, and it was like, demonstration. And so we go, and I'm like spellbound. I'm watching this, they brought somebody in. He was like a ninja actor from the 80s, and he had his kids there, and they're doing like these jumping kicks over chairs, breaking boards. And I'm just like, I just got chills now. I was 9 years
Yeah.
old, and it was like, what is this? And but not long after that, our family moved to South Texas to the Rio Grande Valley, and that's a whole other whole other story. Um, but there's a taekwondo school down there, and I started training and took my first class and was hooked, man. I was just hooked. I couldn't get enough, and it was scary. I was like, I felt very comfortable around adults. My vocabulary was, I was reading, 4 or 5 hours a day, and I'm reading all these books, and I'm very comfortable around adults. Had, friends my own age, but I hadn't done a lot of like, big activities. And martial arts was that first, sort of rite of passage as a kid to be in this group of people and doing all these things. And what's great about it is not competitive. It's like you're all doing the same thing together, but you're not trying to beat somebody, at least, until competing later on. So I just loved it, man. I fell in love with the classes. I had my little uniform and my patches and everything was just perfect. And so that was my first experience of external structure of this is how you do things. This is the right way. This is the wrong way. But I was so invested and so intuitively just drawn to this that it was delightful. There was never a have to. It was always a get to. And my greatest trauma at that time is that I could only go to class 3 times a week. There was like I hated Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays and Sundays because there's no class to go to. But Mondays and Wednesdays, Saturdays, I'd wake up like Christmas. Couldn't wait. So I'm training, going through these classes, which really helped me a lot during some other stuff that was happening in our family at that time, which we may look back to. And we ended up moving back to San Antonio. I took a little bit of a break from martial arts just because I missed, my original school, and I went back to another one. It wasn't the same, so I stopped for a while. Got into Boy Scouts. Stopped after a few months when I realized there's nowhere near as much camping as the Boy Scout manual had led me to believe there would be. So I was like, enough of this. And then I got back into it. I was about 13. Started training again. Started over again as a white belt, which was a great experience. I'd gotten to like brown belt, and I was like a year away from black belt when we moved. And so as a kid, that's such a cool experience to have. You've accumulated all this rank, and man, you've worked for hundreds of hours. As a kid, that's like your whole world. It's your identity. I am a brown belt. But then you back off of training and your skills decline and you don't get to come back in where you were. So it was like an automatic, natural experience of like zero entitlement. Like you
Yeah.
might have done that thing in the past, but when's the last time you did it? So I started over again and then worked my way back up through the ranks. And I was 15, I got my black belt. I was starting to teach in the classes a little bit, and that was just a huge activation. And luckily I had an instructor who, he saw what he had. He had a 15-year-old assistant who was just fanatic about martial arts, who was happy to work for free. So he was, he could realize, all right, let me put this kid in charge. By the time I'm 17, I'm running most of the classes. And, I was making like $50 a month or something, which was mind blowing to me that I could get paid to do this thing that I love, that is my life. Are you kidding me? And yeah, when I was 17, I was, making a few $100 a month. Ended up moving out, got a room with some friends of mine, who was actually family of my karate instructor, and it was just a totally self-sufficient transition. I just knew I'm going to teach for the rest of my life,
Mm.
and that was such a powerful journey because it was really just an extension of that choice that my parents had made to say, like, this is your life. Like we love you unconditionally, tons of affirmation about, worth and about, tons of compliments, but also very little interference.
Mm.
If you want to go and do something, we're sure you can figure it out. It's not,
Mhm.
we're going to help you. It's like, you got this. And it's the most incredible gift.
Wow. Wow. So cool. And so you went on to open schools and you became a businessman at some point.
I did. Probably the business part started when I was around 18 because I was still working for my instructor in San Antonio, and I wanted to help more. I wanted to grow the school. I wanted bigger classes to teach, and I also wanted to make more money. Because I, had this little used car that I wanted to buy. This Mazda RX-7, and I didn't have the money, and I'm like, how can I make more money? So I asked my instructor, and he said, well, teaching only pays $100 a month, but if you want to enroll people, then for every person you enroll, we'll pay you like $20 or something. And I was like, well, how do I do that? And he was like, well, they come in to try class, you give them the class, and then you show them how much it is. That was the extent of my sales training. So I was like, okay. So people started coming in, and I was so passionate. I was so into it. And then I'd show them the rates and they were like, okay, I'd say yes or no. And that was my beginning of really understanding that, it doesn't matter how good you are. Nobody really cares how good you are. If you're really good at something, people will they become spectators. They're just watching you be really good at something. But to
Right.
invite somebody to take that step is a whole different skill set. So I had to, I learned how to ask questions and how to be genuinely interested in what it is that someone else wanted, not what I wanted, or even what I wanted for them. What did they want for themselves? And having developed a fairly robust vocabulary just from reading so much when I was a kid, I was able to use those communication skills and genuine curiosity and start enrolling tons of people. And then I realized later on that I don't have to wait for them to come in. Like there's people everywhere. Are you kidding me? Like that's a martial arts student. He just not enrolled yet. That's a martial arts student. He just not enrolled yet. So I became
Yeah.
an evangelist. And I just, man, wherever I was like, have you tried martial arts yet? And I was so passionate, and there was a, it wasn't needy. It was like I just knew what was on the other side of them trying it. So I was like, just try it. So I became very much like, Ferris Bueller. It was like the question isn't what are we going to do? The question is what aren't we going to do? Come on. And it was infectious, and people came in. So that was kind of the beginning of the business part. And
Yeah.
then very luckily I had an experience when I was 19. I'm like second degree black belt in Taekwondo. I've done probably at that point hundreds of matches inside of tournaments, and I was getting pretty good. I was like the golden boy. Everybody's like, oh, Jesse's here, watch out for his hook kick. It was like I had this little reputation. So I thought, big fish in a small pond. One day I'm at this house party with this girl that I liked, which was a big deal because I was very awkward and very shy. And now I'm at this house party and she's like super cute, and I'm 19 and she's like, a little older, and she's a
Yeah.
nurse and she's super sexy. And I was just like, this is awesome. This is a great life. And we're at this house party and it's packed. and there's some guy across the room who's like staring at me, like shooting daggers. And I asked this girl that I was with, I said, what's that guy's deal? And she's like, oh, that's my boyfriend. And I'm like, it was such a mix of emotions. I'm like, totally testosterone fueled 19-year-old who all of a sudden is like, I'm angry.
Mm,
I'm hurt.
mm.
I'm like angry at him, but also kind of like, oh shit, like I've never really experienced that kind of conflict before. I didn't have a high school to get bullied in. If there's any bullying
Yeah.
problem in our homeschool, it wasn't mine because I was the oldest, you know? So now this is my first experience with aggression.
Sure.
Matches don't have, there's aggressiveness, but it's very controlled. And at the end of the day, you shake hands and no matter who wins or loses. But this is like the real world.
Yeah.
And it was too much for me. And it was a big learning experience because rather than standing up for, what I wanted and what, the connection that we had, I just kind of like, oh, I just like kind of caved and I was like, I'm out of here. So
Mm.
I leave. I'm going down the driveway back to my car. That got that RX-7. I'm signing up all those martial arts students. So I'm going back to my car, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this guy just jumps on me, and I'm
Yeah.
on the ground and this
Oh,
guy's just throwing punches. And Joel, is so crazy. I've done so many martial arts like taekwondo tournaments. And the first thought in my mind, first thing that goes through my head as I'm laying down on the
mm.
getting punched, first thought is he's going to get disqualified. And then I realized there's nobody coming to save me. Like this
Yeah.
is a full on fight. And I realized, my
Oh.
10 years of taekwondo are worthless because I'm on the ground. And
Mm.
so luckily, some people pulled us apart. Now we're
Mm.
kind of like squared off. This guy's yelling at me. And I'm like running this little moral checklist in my head. I'm like, he started it, right? Like he tackled me. That means I'm just like, I can use what I know. So I did this little checklist. I'm like, okay, I'm in the right. So I just like did a little countdown, 1, 2, 3, and I just launched this roundhouse kick, hit him right in the jaw. And he just like he felt like a sack of flour. And I
Wow.
just bounded over him, ran to my car. I was like, I don't want any part of this. As I'm
Yeah.
driving away, I look back. He's standing up. He's wobbly, but he's fine. And it shook my faith because I felt like the worst martial artist in the world. I had failed my art. It's
Mm.
like I'd failed my style and I
Mm.
failed my instructor. I'd failed my students. I mean, I felt like the biggest failure ever, even though I technically won, but it was only like because somebody pulled us off. If that hadn't happened, I might be laying unconscious.
Right.
And as fate, fortune, whatever orchestrates this whole place, um,
Mm.
it was only a couple months later that one of my mentors said, "Hey, come to train. I want to show you something." So this is like 92, 90, early 93. So I go to his school and he says, "Hey, I'm going to show you something." He goes, "Lay down." Lay down. What is this? So I get on the ground and then he gets on top of me and he's like, try and move me. I was like, I can't. And he was like, exactly. And then he goes and does like a jujitsu submission. I'm like, what is that? And he was
Yeah.
like, try it again, try and stop me. And I was like, okay. And I know all these like, wrist locks and, elbows and, what I thought was fighting was
Yeah.
not. And jujitsu was so far superior. I was literally helpless. And it was that combination, getting that information on the heels of this crushing defeat.
Yeah.
I was like, I have to learn this. I
Mm.
have to learn this. And so I began immersing myself in jujitsu. I'm like 19, 20, and I'm training. And all of a sudden, like the wool is pulled from my eyes. I realized that just about every martial art I'd ever seen is, I don't know if the viewers know what the term LARPing is, but it's live action role play. It's where these people dress up in costumes and they
Yeah.
speak in an English accent and they shoot foam arrows at each other. And, it's a
Yeah.
whole culture. But
Yeah.
that's what most martial arts is. It's LARPing. It's never
Yeah.
been tested in the real world.
Yeah.
Jujitsu was based on reality. There's no theory here. If
Mm.
theory doesn't work, it's rejected. If it
Mm.
does work, it's absorbed and improved on until something better comes along, and then that theory is rejected.
Mm.
And so I'm now in this reality based training, not just style and doctrine and as great a workout as it is and as empowering it is, and there are some techniques that are useful, but this was based on physics and it was based on leverage, and it was so intelligent and
Mm.
so effective, and I just became obsessed.
Mm.
And looking back, I realized that that was, for me, that was the ultimate metaphor for understanding reality, because I'm in this deep inquiry of purpose. I'm 19 years old. I'm trying to figure out life, trying to figure out myself, and I'm reading, Siddhartha, which my dad is like. I was 15. He's like, you should read this. And I read Siddhartha, and then reading, um, I just gotten exposed to, like, Think and Grow Rich and Tony Robbins, and then Deepak Chopra, and I'm like, all these guys are kind of passionate, but they're like seem to be saying different things.
Mm.
And I started to realize that, and I didn't see this till much later, that oftentimes, those who become prominent voices in growth, spirituality, or in business or wellness end up getting this feedback loop from their audience, from the marketplace, that creates a blind spot that makes them very, very unlikely to relentlessly test the things that they've come to know as truth.
Wow.
And instead, they become sort of advocates for this. And then they get reinforced. And next thing you know, it's the best. Why is it the best? Well, because I'm doing it. And there's this
Mhm.
this term called ethnocentricity, and it's the human tendency to just assume that wherever you're at, that's the best. It's the
Right.
best religion, it's the best diet, it's the best relationship structure, it's the best financial model. Why? Because I'm doing it, and it's like
Mhm.
this massive projection.
Mm.
So because jujitsu helped me to clear the difference between theory that sounded good in an artificial environment versus tactical techniques that worked in the real world with no rules, I became obsessed. And I stopped caring about truth with a capital T. And I just began asking myself, is this useful? Which then
Mhm.
meant that I had to take full responsibility for making decisions about whether or not something worked for me. I wasn't responsible for if it works for someone else. I'm not responsible for if it used to work, but now it's not, and I'm just going to ignore that. No, I need to take full agency, full ownership. And it also means I have to take responsibility for what it is that I want. Because
Mm.
if I don't know what I want, then it's just the default is to just become a collector of options instead of
Mm.
becoming proficient with tools, whether it's a
Yeah.
communication tool, a relationship tool, a health tool. So you have to know what you want. And
Mm.
so all of that, this is all happening in a very tight period. I'm like 19, early 20. And then I was bouncing in this little nightclub in San Antonio. It was a couple of years before I opened my school. The UFC has now come out, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And everybody's like shocked. And I already had the inside scoop because I already knew jujitsu, or knew about jujitsu. So the whole martial arts world is just getting rocked because they're seeing this, skinny 176 pound, 6'1" Brazilian guy
Yeah.
just wipe out these monsters, 220 pound kickboxers, and they're helpless against this lean Brazilian dude. And
Yeah.
so, I'm 19, 20 years old, obviously just idolizing Hoist Gracie because,
Yeah.
I have a similar build. I'm like, man, if that guy can do it, I can do it. It's a good confidence builder. So this club that I'm bouncing at starts having these fight nights where there's no rules. Like no is literally like the first UFC. So no rules, no time limit, no weight limit. So you could have a
Mm.
guy who's like, me, I was like 145, very tall, lean dude going up against somebody that could weigh 180.
Mhm.
And then there's also no safety equipment. So there's no gloves, there's no headgear, there's no body armor. You're literally just going in there. Um, you got a gi on, or you got a t-shirt, but other than that, you're naked. Like, it's bare
Yeah.
knuckle. And I realized I have to sign up to do this. Otherwise, I have no business teaching people how to defend themselves if I've never done anything except that one time in that driveway where I actually kind of got beat up. So I
Mm.
signed up to fight, and
Wow.
it was just a very, very powerful experience.
Mm.
That year, I ended up winning 9 fights, lost
Wow.
two, and that was an absolute baptism in reality. Like
Mm,
it was such a rite of passage, such a proving ground that then formed the foundation of confidence and understanding based on experience to then feel like I'm ready to go open my school. So I was 23 when I opened my first school, and it was a
mm.
heck of a ride getting there.
Oh man, that's so cool, dude. Amazing. To get in on it that early. I remember I was training in a Muay Thai kickboxing school, AMC in Kirkland, Washington, and some of the early UFC guys were there, and
Yeah,
the energy was really incredible. Those early 90s, it was just so exciting, and the pancration, the ground stuff that I was learning. But man, it's I've never stepped into the ring, I've been beat up. I used to sell LSD to like 30-year-old gangsters in Tacoma when I was like a young teenager, and I've had
wow.
some really intense, physical experiences or just getting just destroyed by people twice my size. And when you survive it and you come out the other side and you realize it didn't kill you, you start to get, like more curious and more bold and more willing, and so it really set me free actually to realize that I, can still show up and, you know, go on adventures and realize that even if something does get really tricky, that I will likely survive it and heal from it. And so
Yeah.
I started hanging out with more and more powerful older people and putting myself in situations that were really dangerous,
Mm,
but really liberating. So always, whether it's police or gang stuff, there was always an element of like at any moment anything can happen.
mm,
Very dysregulating for the nervous system, but it also I
mm,
was able to heal from
mm,
it down the line, and now I practice these very strange shamanic movements that are similar to like Tai Chi or Qigong,
mhm.
and they make it possible to get really, really silent because they're like a moving meditation. And you find out that this physical world isn't it's not actually a physical
Mm-mm,
place. It's
mm-mm.
a hallucination of sorts or some sort of holographic projected experience. But pull that back into being like your first fight, you step into a physical experience, like that. It manifests as a physical experience because we perceive ourselves as physical beings.
Right, right.
But these teachers that I worked with, they said if there's no fight within you, if you're no longer fighting
Bingo,
with yourself, right, then
bingo,
everything shapeshifts.
bingo.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it it literally can't appear in your reality except by invitation.
Yeah.
And there's I forget where I heard this a couple of years ago, but that preparation equals invitation. You know, whatever you're actively preparing for and putting your mind on, that is creating a field.
Yeah.
And this one sentient field that I believe that we live in
Mm,
just responds to that and becomes that. And I think that um, because we have this full perceptual experience of individuation. You know, we
mm,
can experience I am me, you are you, and we get to have that as a like prerequisite for creation because there's duality. You know, there's up and down and left and right, and there's hot and cold, and there's light and dark, and what we perceive as good and evil, which is good is just another word for I like that, and evil is another word for I don't like that, and that's all subjective. So we have to have this subjective perspective, but then the field, the sentient field, I believe that we get to think in a non-physical form. So, we have these images and thoughts and feelings, but the field thinks in physical form. And
mm,
so everything that we see physically, these beautiful collections of atoms and molecules, and the wave collapsing into a particle, that's the mind of God. Like that's the
mm,
dream of God. God dreams in the physical and we dream in the non-physical, and it's a perfect harmony because in order for God to continue evolving, God needs us. And that's why we're here, is to create through thought, which is basically,
mm.
basically just like putting in the order at the restaurant in the kitchen And then the chef
Mhm.
goes to work and gets to make all this stuff and turn it into the food. And so
Mhm.
then it's this perfect cycle. And in this dimension, we have time because we're here to just get really good at creating. Like we're here to get good at thinking and creating through thought, which is why we have this buffer illusion really of time. But you go up another
Mhm.
dimension, and then the dimensions above that time is not at all the same. It's literally just thought creation. But we're here to do that. We're like, we're still toddlers as a species, so we're just learning
Yeah.
how the rules work. But it's coming. That next dimension is beginning to merge, and that's why we're
Yeah.
seeing so much bifurcation today between people hanging on to the old structures and those who are leaning into what's coming forth from within, which is why what you're doing is so powerful, dude. Like it's literally just, giving people a space to feel that signal coming forth from within, which I believe is really a signal from the future. It's a signal from the
Yeah.
future activating within us so that we can remember the future and remember what we did to get there.
Love it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that idea. And I write myself letters to my past and let
Hmm.
Joel, this is what's going to happen, and then I
Yeah,
receive letters from my future self telling me like it's just information, right? So you become that much more sensitive to these different alternative ways of communication. They're not word based, but they're feeling
right,
based.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Have you explored, did you go into psychedelics at all, or did you naturally gain access to these perceptual intensities?
I I um I've been a late bloomer in everything in my life. So I
Yeah.
didn't even encounter any sort of psychedelic experience or substance until I was almost 40 years old. So I went through most of my life just still deep down that homeschooled kid from Texas, that's
Yeah.
like curious about everything, skeptical until proven otherwise. And even then, my belief is only as strong as the last proof. If it's not proven repeatedly, I just reject the belief. Um, but I've had mystical experiences my whole life. Um,
Yeah.
I was just talking about this with a friend yesterday who did an art show in Austin, and um, when I was a kid, I would just sit and like take a break from reading, and I'm just like staring at the wall, and all of a sudden the wall would just start to shimmer, like it would just get like wavy and hazy, and I
Mhm.
just knew that if I was to go up to the wall, I could probably just put my hand through it. Like I'm like 7, 8, 9 years
Mhm.
old, and I'm like, what? And then I would just kind of like will it to become solid again, and it become solid, and then I would will it to become a wave, and it become a wave, and I would just be like, that's cool. Like I don't know how many use that, but that's sure cool. And then I had other times when in my teenage years where I would just have these causeless um, luminescent experiences. I was sitting one time waiting for one of my classes to start at this little private school that I was teaching at. And I was, in my karate uniform. I'm probably 16, 17. And I'm just sitting there and, just kind of thinking about life. And all of a sudden, it was like somebody turned on the lights. Like the light, everything around me was glowing. And I just felt this love, like love, like wild love, man. Like that, the kind of love
Yeah.
that's why people take drugs, is to feel that. Like it's just so
Yeah.
much love. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like even too happy to cry. I'm like, why cry? Like that's just and so I'm just basking in this thing, and there was no message, there was no
Yeah.
information. It was just, just this clean experience. And then the light kind of faded,
Mhm.
and it felt like it kind of went back inside of me. And I was like, wow. So I had a lot of experiences like that. Many,
Yeah.
many, many times, many, many ways. Psychedelics, which I've had my fair share across many different substances, has been largely confirmational, just confirming things that I already
Yeah.
knew. And it's been a wonderful laboratory. There's you encounter this, demonic machine being on DMT, and it's like over you, and you're experiencing this terror. But then I don't know, man. I can't take evil seriously because the only reason it exists is because of human fear. And if you stop
Yeah.
feeding evil with fear, it can't exist. So, I'm in this full-blown
Mhm.
DMT trip, and this evil thing is like total and infinite. And I'm just like feeling the terror, to the point where I feel like I need to puke, and I'm just like feeling it. But then the little like the circuit breaker kicks on or something. And I'm like, who gives you the right to do this? I don't authorize this.
Yeah.
Like you have no
Yeah.
authority. If so, prove your jurisdiction.
Mhm.
And then it just
Mhm.
instantly converts. And it was like, all right, just checking. We just want to make sure you know what you know.
Wow. Oh man, thank you for sharing that. It's I discovered the same thing. I opened myself up really young and I was hanging out with a shaman that was very gifted, and I was encountering interdimensional beings at night in the wilderness. We call them entities of the night.
Hmm.
And my fear was so intense that it was almost destructive. I was, like shaking to the
Mm.
point of like, self-destruction. And at one point, after many years of just suffering through the intensity, my teacher just said, just be with them. And I
Yeah.
just relaxed and I just
Yeah.
accepted them and I wasn't
Yeah.
afraid. So they quit coming to me
Right.
because
Right.
it was like this respect.
Yeah.
And then I realized these are my relations. These are beings that exist in the wilderness that are powerful, right? And so I learned to sit in that intensity. And the hairs on the back of my neck go up when when it turns twilight and I'm alone in the mountains. I sense
Hmm.
these playful energies. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh shit, I don't know if I'm up for it tonight, and sometimes I
Yeah.
leave
Yeah.
because I'm not feeling it. But
Yeah.
sometimes I hang out, and so I'm really thankful that other people are aware that these beings do exist, but we don't have to fear them. And in fact, it's
Mm-mm.
the emotion that brings them towards us. So you can develop this neutrality as an observer, and then it's just like a totally different experience. And that applies with schizophrenic people in Austin, and that applies with wherever you go in the world. Your fear is going to pull events into your life. And if you get aware of what your fear is and how you're projecting it into the field, you can change your entire reality,
Bingo.
from within. So it's just
Yep.
super incredible.
I love it, dude. And there's so much you just shared there. The that field, if it's a field of fear or any permutation of fear, then of course you're going to get things to be scared of. Like
Yeah.
it's so simple. But we most people tend to get it backwards, where their feelings are sourced from their external perception. So they see
Right.
something that creates a meaning, and they create the meaning in their mind, and then they get the feeling, and then more of that thing shows up. So when something, a big part of what I work with, the entrepreneurs that do this like deep conscious programming and interfacing with reality in a different way. One of the things we do is to, just going back to fighting and martial arts and self-defense. Somebody throws a punch, and that's a
Hmm.
stimulus. And if you're not
Hmm.
trained, you're gonna go like, and you're gonna freak out. So what you do is you
Hmm.
you have very slowly, here comes the punch, and now we're gonna practice the move, the block, the cover, and we're gonna practice slowly. Practice cover, practice cover,
Hmm.
practice cover. And then we're gonna speed up little by little by little by little until a full-blown, full speed attack, surprise attack, and boom, instantly you're covering
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you've retrained your reflex. But there's the stimulus, then there's the perceptual pause, and then there's the
Hmm.
response. So that stimulus, the pause, and the response, all the power is in that pause.
Yeah.
And so we train people to, go back, like you said, go back to the past and look at something that happened that was painful, and then just say, well,
Hmm.
given everything that you know now,
Hmm.
if you could have put reality on pause right the moment that first bad thing happened, you got the news, the awful thing happened to your body, the car wreck, the devastating news from another person or about another person. Okay, boom, freeze. There's the
Hmm.
information. Now let's stop. before you decide what that information is going to mean, what could it mean?
Mm,
And if you're not don't have access to that, fast forward through time, through
mm,
inquiry, through learning, through exploration, what will that mean later on down the road? What will
mm,
happen as a result of your choices for you and for others because of that thing? What's good about this in the
mm,
future? And if
mm,
it's going to be good in the future,
mm.
it could probably be good now. And then
Yeah.
eventually you realize there is no such thing as bad news. It's
Hmm.
just information. And so, it does take practice because everybody's so addicted to this physical world and they see, I like that, I don't like that. And then they get jump on social media and get their preferences become even more programmed.
Yeah.
But now is all that's real, and the signal that we're in now is what's
Mm,
informing the sentient field about what to create in our subjective experience. And it does take the buffer of time. You do this for 2, 3 days and you
yeah.
you feel better, but you're still getting last week's and last month's, residuals coming
Yeah.
in. So when they come in, you got to go, oh, that's from last month. But I'm going to give less attention to that, more attention to what I want.
Yeah.
And then that reality begins changing. And the biggest problem that I see people have is that life starts getting so good that it bumps up against their imagination and they literally can't imagine it getting any better. So they
Mm,
stop consciously creating. And then it starts to fade back to the collective consensus default where people get older as they advance in years and they get sick and then they struggle with money and all that. And I'm not putting down those experiences, but one of the biggest challenges that I see people have is when they begin consciously creating, things start getting so good that they
mhm.
stop consciously creating because they think they've arrived. And it's like, you don't, that's not how it works. You're always creating. So keep creating.
Oh man, thank you for saying that. It's very helpful actually. It's um the limit, the ceiling, people encounter like I did, I was in a really dysfunctional marriage and I thought it was like my job to stay in it, right? And to just like
Yep.
prove that I can fix this. And
Yep.
so I just had this real limitation that I created that wasn't, I'm looking around and I'm judging everyone. You may pretend you're happy, but I don't think you really are. But then it turned out, well, I was wrong. Happiness is real. Like harmony is
Yeah.
expansive. There are people that are really in their power and are living a magical life. And when I stopped pointing the finger and judging people and
Mm,
finally listened enough to get out of the marriage and to do all the things, I
mm.
finally had permission to, I finally gave myself permission to imagine what it would feel like to feel the feelings that I want to feel.
Wow. That's so big, dude. That's so big.
Yeah,
There's so much there. It's the permission.
yeah,
Like, and we're the only ones that can grant it to ourselves.
totally. Yeah, it was such a breakthrough because I would try to do that and then I would exit it. I couldn't even give myself permission to desire or want, these things. And it's like I
Mm,
wasn't worthy. And so I was trying to hack my reality like in
hmm.
in like a linear way. But when I
Right.
finally, came out of that, I discovered the not doings
Mm,
and that there's a way to just exist without action and then that energy builds so that you can take action. But it requires, that capacity
mm.
to stop and to feel. And so
Yeah.
the healing that happens for people when they realize that it's possible, it's very confronting.
Mm,
Realize that you don't have to be running all these thoughts all the time. In fact, most of them aren't necessary.
right.
You can just catch yourself in this stream of, contemplation or analyzing things and realize you can do that without the words. You can
Right.
just
Right.
feel the feeling.
That's
So
it, man.
yeah, so cool.
That's everything. It really is. I mean, the feeling, and there's so much great material out there. Neville Goddard stuff and,
Yeah.
Abraham Hicks has some good stuff. And, there's no shortage of these messages. But I think, I don't think I fully know that the reason why everything's getting so loud out there in the world, and there's these artificial, completely constructed, in some back room somewhere about, okay, ready? Call in the
Yeah.
latest drama of the day,
Yeah.
and it's like if anybody's seen the Hunger Games, and they're like, all right, bring in the fire, and it's like that's literally what's happening. And so if somebody is not connected internally and they're not connected to their um, the effect that they have on the field as it becomes around them, then they by default they get sucked into creating more of whatever the field is, other people's field is telling them to create. And so there's I really take a lot of joy and just peacefulness that when something gets really loud on the outside, I can
Mm.
notice my orientation to it. And if I feel like I need to weigh in on it, then I'm just kind of jumping in with the crowd. And so, in the business and marketing world, last week or 2 weeks ago, Alex Hormozy, famous marketer, sits down with Tony Robbins, famous coach, and there's this big intervention. Oh my God, my whole news feed is just filled with everybody's thoughts about that thing.
Yeah.
And all I did was just say, well, now that we have that out of the way, I'd love to see Alex sit down with David Sutcliffe or Kyrie Oliver. There's levels to this game, y'all. That's all I said. And then everybody lost their shit. They're like, what do you have against Tony? Like, lots actually, but that's none of your business.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, or the ice stuff and all of that. And I just see in the snippets that I've got, if somebody leaves their physical body
Mm.
because of a rendezvous with another person that has an arm, the lawful term is arm, legal term is firearm, those two perfectly attracted each other.
Yeah.
It couldn't be any other way.
Yeah.
And in case anybody listening to this is
Mm.
is like, well, Jesse, easy for you to say. Listen, I grew up completely pacifist,
Hmm.
totally without any kind of guns. And then I realized I'm avoiding it because I
Mm.
have a lot of fear and story, and that
Mm.
didn't work with my philosophy of, is this useful? And I realized it's not useful for me to have this irrational fear when I've never even encountered one of these things. So I learned to shoot, mostly to overcome my
Yeah.
irrational fear that this thing is like a poisonous snake that's just going to explode somehow. And I realized, wow, this is a different level of responsibility. And so in that journey, a couple of years ago, this is 2023, um, from 2020 to 20 mid 23, I was really in the prepper mode. And I was loving
Yeah.
it. I was like, this just feels like being a kid again. When I had
Yeah.
like a survival kit in my pocket and I had like, buried a jar of peanut butter in the backyard. Like I was already doing this since I was like 9 years old. This is just
Yeah.
like more. I have land and I have guns and generators and a well, and that's cool. But I was having fun with it. But
Sure.
I didn't realize how much I had started to absorb the fear frequency and the threat frequency, which
Yeah.
then when you absorb a frequency, we are amplifiers. So we have to amplify that frequency. And then the sentient field has to give us things that match it. I didn't
Hmm.
realize how much I was in that because
Wow.
I felt good. I
Hmm.
felt, confident. I felt strong. I was zero paranoid, but I was
Hmm.
preparing.
Hmm.
Preparation equals invitation. So one day I finished a VIP coaching day with a client who was at my house. I took him back to his hotel and I'm driving back to my place. And this is like a $2 million house in Westlake Hills, like beautiful house. So I pull my Forerunner back in and I go in the front door, this massive, beautiful, giant glass door, like frosted glass, like it's a work of art. And I never lock my doors, like whatever. But as I'm opening the door, I'm like, something's up. And I open the
Mm.
door and there's a man
Mm.
standing in my hallway and
Mm.
he's pointing a pistol at my face and he
Mm.
says, don't make me shoot you.
Wow.
So, stimulus, there's the stimulus. And I'm not carrying, which I was very happy about because that may have escalated.
Yeah.
He was too far away for any of my, Krav Maga, Jiu-Jitsu, fighting instincts to kick in. And I didn't have anybody with me, which I was very appreciative of. So if you're going to get a gun pulled on you, that's those are the conditions to have a gun pulled on you.
Wow.
So immediately my brain kicks in. It's like create distance. So I
Mm.
duck around the front of the side of the door outside And I go around my Forerunner to put the engine block between me and this guy. I don't have the illusion of the Hollywood movies. So like glass is not going to stop anything. And
Hmm.
so I'm hunkering down behind the engine block, looking to see this guy. He's coming out of the house after me and he's
Mm.
running around the truck. And I go around the truck. I'm just like, keep the engine block between me and this dude. And he's the whole time, you know what he's yelling? Don't make me shoot you. Don't make me shoot you. And I'm like, literally, bro, I'm literally trying not to make you shoot me. So finally, I'm like, this isn't going anywhere. So I just turn and I just put as much distance as I could between me and the
Yeah.
barrel of that gun. And man, I wish
Oh.
somebody would have clocked it. So I'm positive I set a personal record for the 100-meter dash. Went
Yeah,
around down this
dude.
little ravine behind the houses, and I'm running, and it's like Last of the Mohicans. I'm just like hauling ass. And finally, I stop and I'm listening. I'm waiting. I don't hear anything. I'm like, okay. So I call 911. And for whatever reason, I don't really get involved in politics, but Austin has had a lot of defund the police activity lately. And so I call 911. It rings, it rings, it rings. I get voicemail for Austin
No way.
911. I didn't even know 911 could have voicemail. They're like, you've reached the Austin Police Department. Please leave your name and the nature of your emergency. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? This is hilarious. I didn't think it was funny at the time. Then I called the local PD, Westlake PD, and they said, we already have cars on the way. I was like, all right. So I get back to the car or back to the house. The guy is long gone.
Oh.
All like four cops from Westlake PD are there and they're very friendly. We dust the place for prints. They don't find anything. And all that turned out what happened was this guy was just burgling houses in the
Mm-hmm.
area and to be there, happened to be there right when I get home.
Yeah.
I really didn't have, I mean, I have valuable things, but they're valuable to me. I've
Yeah.
got, $7,000 worth of crystals, but it's like,
Yeah.
it's not the kind of thing you're going to steal. I didn't have a TV, it was personal stuff, but I did have a pistol tucked away. Like you had to be Sherlock Holmes to find this thing.
Yeah.
He found it and
Wow.
happened to be stealing my pistol when
No
I
way.
walked in.
No way.
So it was my gun that got pointed at my face and
Yeah.
it was completely unloaded because I
Yeah.
keep the ammo and the pistol separate. And it's a
Yeah.
very odd caliber. It's a 10 millimeter for those that know guns. That's not a common caliber. So there is literally no danger,
Wow.
like literally no danger. But I got to have the experience of the perfect physical manifestation of the frequency that I'd been in.
Yeah.
The sentient field never lies. It's always
Mhm.
giving us exactly the full manifestational residual reflection, the 3D reflection of our previous manifestational output. It was so awesome.
Wow. Oh man, very cool. Yeah, I mean, did you realize that right away that prepping and the fear and
Good.
all that stuff, or did it take
Yeah,
time to
great.
reflect?
Great question. For me, the most powerful part of the story, in my experience and what I've heard feedback from people who've heard it, wasn't the gun being pulled, and it wasn't the escape or the return. The moment the cops left, they were there for a couple hours. I'm keyed up still.
Yeah.
My body's now getting this adrenaline dump. I know that I'm not thinking rationally. I know that I'm defaulting to training. I'm
Mhm.
responding to the threat still, even though there's not a threat, because we have this buffer of time and the chemicals work through our body. Our beliefs get souped up chemically. So things you kind of believed, now you are convinced of. So I'm aware that I'm operating in this heightened illusion of security. I need to
Mhm.
be safe. I need to be safe. I need to be safe. And I'm having all sorts of weird thoughts like, all right, I'm going to sleep on top of my house and I'm going to bring my rifle from my truck. And I'm like, bro,
Mhm.
that's how you created this in the first place. Sorry, I'm getting a
Right.
call here. Make sure I can not end our call. There we
Mhm.
go. So I realized that's not helpful. So I thought, all right, well, I'm going to just go stay at a hotel so that I have distance and I can, really process this properly. So I went
Mhm.
to the Hotel Magdalena on South Congress, nice little place. Check in. It's now like 10 o'clock at night. I check in. I'm still kind of disassociated, from the thing that happened. But I trust that the methods or answers will come to me about how to more elegantly, proactively resolve this instead of it turning into a story that then runs as background code and affects my reality because I don't have time for that shit. I don't want those viruses. So go up to the hotel, close the door, turn the lock, put the latch, and those three actions. It was close the door, turn the lock, close the latch,
Hmm.
boom. And that was like a scene change. That was like a set change. I was like, all right, we're in a brand new segment now. So I put my bag on the bed and then I just stood up in the middle of the room and I just shook my body violently for like a minute and a half and just shook it out. I'm every
Yeah.
cell, every tendon, every muscle, every organ. I'm like moving my face, moving my neck, my hands. I'm just contorting my body, shaking. And I start making these sounds.
Yeah.
Who knows what the people in the next rooms were thinking? But I'm just like this guttural, like, "Rah, rah, rah," and then I'm like coughing and did that for like a minute and a half, maybe a little longer. I was like, all right, phase one done. Like, let the body shed as much of this as I can. Now it's time to get conscious and intentional. So I opened up my journal and I wrote at the top of the page, why am I glad this happened? And then I just started writing down first thought that came to mind. And the first thing that came to mind is, damn, I didn't know I could run that fast. Good job, body. Like, way to go. And then I
Yeah.
just kept
Yeah.
writing. Why else? Why else? Why else? And by the time I got, a page in, I'm like, what incredible feedback from this sentient field that I am the
Hmm.
creator of my experience. And I can, wow, what a lesson. Another thought that I had, quite unapologetically, is, man, I'm going to help so many people with this story.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to help so many people by telling this story. And then the next thought is, man, if there's all this value going out in the world, man, there's going to be a lot of value coming back to me. Holy shit, I'm going to make a lot of money from this story. This is awesome. So I'm writing that down. And then I write down about the guy. Like I felt
Hmm.
like legit compassion for the dude. I was like,
Hmm.
man, what must have happened in his life to think it's a good idea to break into somebody's house in Texas? Like that's those all those TikTok reels, dumb ways to die. Like breaking into somebody's house in Texas, like that's up there with, guaranteed ways to exit the physical plane. So then I start getting curious about this guy. I'm like, man, I wonder what's going on for him. And then I felt
Hmm.
love. Like, man, you know what? If I saw this guy, I think I would just give him a hug and be like, man, are you okay? Like,
Yeah.
I don't feel
Wow.
called to help him, but I'm curious. And so I just wrote a couple of pages of why am I glad this happened. And then I just had a little conversation with my body. I said, if there's any other residual stuff you have to do to get rid of this, I won't resist it. Turns out the next week I got like this conjunctivitis in my eye and my eye got all swelled up. And then I had
Wow.
like this flu and fever. I was like, yeah, get it out. Let's go. Because I don't want it settling into the subroutine that then is informing my cells that then is going to become fucking pancreatic cancer or some bullshit. Like get it cleared out now. And that was that.
Oh man, dude. What a cool story, and so thankful that you, yeah, just model what it means. Like I talk about that a lot, that like when a deer gets hit on the road and it survives, it'll shake
Yeah.
out all that energy and it really works, right? So a lot of
Yeah.
the movement work that I teach is to get so in your body that you're so comfortable, so grounded, like you're like a tree rooted to the earth
Mm,
that when you do learn to truly allow your body to dance or shake or express exactly as it needs to, like that permission, then
mm,
you become capable of healing yourself. You don't need to go see a doctor. You don't
right.
need to get probed or tested. I haven't
Not
gone
at
to
all.
a doctor since I was 11 years old. And
Dude, you got me beat. Last time I was 25. So that was like
yeah,
27 years ago. That's epic, dude.
good. So good. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so, I mean, I'm glad to hear that, it's not just a spiritual concept for you, but that we can actually take care of ourselves. And, Andrew Kaufman speaks to this a lot, like get yourself out of that world. There is a
Yeah.
way to do so. And in fact, it's critical at some point because it's such a fear-based program that if they do find something, then all that energy and attention on
Yep.
you to
Yep.
do it the way that they can control it. But it is a real hypnosis piece that most people aren't likely to come out of. It's for the few of us, I think, that are here
Yeah.
to have a real experience with this obstacle course. The majority of people
Hmm.
are going to be like kind of the buffer. They're going to feed this non-human parasitic energy because they're inside of a story that is basically not real. And so they're not real, essentially. And that's what people call them NPCs. I don't think they're actually NPCs. I
I
think
agree. I don't think they are either.
you can scratch the surface
Yeah.
of any creature and there's a shamanic awareness if the right experiences were to happen. But I don't think everyone's soul development is at the point where that's likely to occur, and everything happens for us, not to us. And so you just start redesigning your understanding of this existence. So
So good.
obviously you're helping a lot of people these days. You stopped teaching martial arts, I guess, and you're taking it more into this what you're sharing with me today. And yeah, I'd just love to know more about what it is that you do and how you work.
It's been a moving parade for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
After I built that organization, had great partners. We had 53 people on staff. We built up to 8 schools, a consulting company that was working with hundreds of schools. And then in 2012, I just realized that I'm complete. And it took me a couple months to really admit that. But then I sold my business to a partner. 6 months later, got divorced, and then willfully, it was a, in retrospect, it was a combination of pride, love, and guilt that caused me
Hmm.
to say, yes, I'll sign this agreement. Texas is not an alimony state. She had 3 children, but we didn't have children together. So I wasn't legally bound to do anything, but I felt honor bound. So 80% of the sale of the business went to her and went to basically pay for the divorce. So in 2013, I'm making a couple $1,000 a month as a residual from the sale, and I really don't know what else I'm going to do. So I just totally surrendered. I just yielded to the process of listening and what I now understand of as time piercing. Like I began to be remembered by my future self. My future self, who'd already made all these beautiful decisions and was now living this life, was thinking about me, was remembering me, and I would experience that memory of my future self as imagination. And so when I'm imagining, I'm just being remembered by my future self and go, oh wow, that's badass. Romania. I'm flying to Romania. Okay. And so I would just say yes to the whatever the next thing was, the best next thing. If I've got 3 things to think of, 3 things to do, or 10 things
Hmm.
to do, which one is glowing? Which one is like, do this? Which one is joy? Like, bam. And I would just do that.
Hmm.
And over the process, I ended up making these videos on social media, started calling them the mind vitamin videos, and people really liked it. I had decades of, performance experience teaching. Toughest audience in the world is 4-year-old white belt martial arts students with ADD who just came off Ritalin. Like those are like that you got to be good to keep their attention. So I learned to engage and I learned to work with frequencies because kids, you can't lie to kids. If your
Yeah.
frequency is not completely congruent on point, you'll lose them. And so, and then I realized most people are just big kids anyway. So these videos did very
Right.
well because there was an energy in them. This audience starts growing. I got into coaching consulting, and then I started creating programs. And I did that for a long time through last year and on so many different subjects because I'm still that research nut who's so
Hmm.
into whatever I'm into. So if it's law, all of a sudden I'm obsessed about law and then taking all these steps and creating all these remedies. And next thing it's like last time I filed taxes, paid taxes, 2015, because I realized legally I don't have to do that. So once I corrected those steps, I began teaching other people, but that's like a piece. Teaching about time and how to use future memories for healing and for creation. There's that. But I'm really this year, very much following the passing of my father last year. He passed on August
Yeah.
1st, and it was such an epic experience. Yeah, another story maybe for another time, but that was it was incredible. And I didn't grieve properly until the holidays came. I kept
Mm.
myself busy, kept myself useful, and then the holidays came. I was like, all right, the Gregorian calendar may be bullshit, but I'm gonna just pretend that it's real. And I'm just going to go through this period from, Christmas to New Year's and just feel. And it was so hard. It was so not fun. And I felt disconnected from everything. And I went through this like depression and I'm just observing it. I was like, all right, that's just what is right now. Let me just be here. And then as it faded, as it must, and as the energy starts coming back in, I realized like I don't want to, I'm done doing just programs the way that I have. And I really want to go much narrower, much deeper with far fewer people. And so
Cool.
what I'm envisioning right now, at some point there will be a tour and there's this reality show that's in the works, but it's just become clear to me that that's later. There's no rush right now. Take care of the immediate things. Reconnect to yourself, reconnect to the mission, which even I use that term loosely. Reconnect to joy, reconnect to simplicity. Go, way, way deeper with way fewer people. And so, what I think that's going to look like right now is having live events. And event even sounds kind of production-y, gimmicky. But really, it's at a level where we've got mostly entrepreneurs who are, they're very curious, they're very accomplished, and
Mhm.
standard personal development doesn't work for them. Or if there are more esoteric things, there's not a
Mhm.
real translation to physical reality. And if it's super marketing, scaling, it tends not to have a soul and a mysticism to it. But we're putting all of those into one thing. So we're looking at doing these events maybe every month, maybe every couple months. Cool places, Mexico, Austin, wherever else we decide to go. It's probably going to be no more than 6 or 7 entrepreneurs for like 3, 4 days, and we're just gonna go deep. So that's what I'm excited about right now.
Oh man, cool. That's so cool, dude. You're gonna help a
Yeah.
lot. I mean, you've already helped a lot of people, but it's so cool to be of service and the energy, the way it works, right? When you're really helping people and you're watching them grow and transform, it's like this boost of energy comes in so that more of that can happen. It's
Yeah.
a really magical simplicity. I've seen though, and some of my mentors get so spiritual and go into like guru culty energies.
Hmm.
And it's just, it's like I want to warn them or tell them, but at the same time, I get told not to. I just exit
Right.
and observe, right? And
Yep.
it's exciting for them in the moment, but it's so hard to kind of to just be honest with ourselves around this stuff. So, just keeping it real. And I love what you brought up around like kind of what I call retrocausal healing, that you can go back into
Hmm.
a memory and you can actually react differently than you did.
Yes. Yes.
And it totally changes everything, whether
Yes.
that's a martial
Yes.
art experience or yeah, just how powerful our perception of things is. So yeah, man, so glad we got to talk. Um,
Likewise, Joel. So
yeah,
good, man.
really appreciate you that you're out there and so glad we got to meet in person. Look forward to I'll be down in your hood for Confluence. I'm going to be a speaker at a
Yeah. At
maybe
Alex's event.
workshop at
Good.
Confluence. So
Good.
maybe we can meet up if I'd love to hang out sometime.
Yeah. I may pop out there for a bit. I had been planning last year, had been planning to do the tour.
Yeah.
Um, but then it just with this season of shedding, and it just became so clear to me, like stick around Texas. So it's a great chance I'll see you there.
Oh, good, man. Well, how can people get a hold of you? And yeah, just any final thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, I'm with respect to the many people that I often get DMs from. I'm entering an unreachable season, not
Yeah.
invisible but unreachable.
Yeah,
But
good.
whatever content I do put out, Instagram is a great place. It's
Yeah,
the Time Piercer,
cool.
the Time Piercer on Instagram, or Jesse Elder on Facebook.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking the time, man. Really appreciate it.
It's really really an honor, Joel. And I knew this was going to be good, and it
Yeah.
delivered.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks everybody.
Appreciate you.
Look forward to, yeah, you too, man. Cool, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for checking out Jesse Elder, and look forward to next session, next talk. All right, much love, everyone.